Hey there, everyone. It's Camber here with YoPro in the Know. We are here today with Jordan Montgomery. He's going to chat in a moment, but first off, just want to give a little introduction. Jordan is a coach and keynote speaker. He's also the owner of Montgomery Companies. He was connected to us through Sarah Henning, who was a previous YoPro Know interviewee. They know each other. We'll find out how they know each other in a moment, but he is currently living in Iowa City. 33 years old, and I'm excited to get to know Jordan today. So Jordan, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, Camber. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So why don't we get started? Just give us a background, brief background, and then we'll dive into the details. So where you're from, what you're currently doing, and then we'll talk a little bit more about your history, your career history.
Yeah, so I'm originally from small town Iowa and currently live in Tiffin, Iowa, just outside of Iowa City, Iowa. Married to my wife, Ashley. We have 3 young girls, and together my wife and I own Montgomery Companies. So the big joke is that she runs the business and I run my mouth. So I speak and coach all day, every day, and she just kind of runs the day-to-day operations of our business. So we do have a team and have some partners that we coach with and consult with, and work mostly, Camber, today with sales organizations. So we work with people that are in the people business, a lot of entrepreneurs, small business owners, financial advisors, real estate agents. So our work spans multiple industries, and there's a broad range in terms of demographics. But I went to the University of Iowa, started a career in finance. I worked for a Fortune 100 financial services firm, and then pivoted from that financial services firm to own our own company now, Montgomery Companies, which is about 3 years old, and been a speaker and a coach really for the last 10 years, but have done it under the umbrella of Montgomery Companies for the last 3. So without going into more detail and boring you with the full story, that's the short story.
No. That's a great recap. Thank you. Tell us about what that switch was like. So you said you were in the financial services industry. Why did you make that switch?
So it really happened on the advice of a mentor. He said, I know that you have this interest in doing some of the work that I do. And I thought, Camber, I would just do it on the side. I was fortunate that because of some early success in the financial services industry, I had the opportunity to speak and coach. And so I just sort of fell in love with that work. I was a financial advisor. I ran a financial services office. And then my third hat that I wore was sort of a consultant. And I would get asked to go speak to a lot of other offices based on the growth and development of our office, which was a real honor. And I just fell in love with that work. I had some mentors in that space that were doing things at a really high level, working with professional athletes and executives at major firms. So we started this firm sort of on the side. I never thought I would fully pivot from the financial services industry. It was just a function of growth, opportunity, and some key people in my life. So sometimes you start something small and it takes you to a place you didn't intend to go. But in our case, it's taken us to a really special place that we're grateful for.
Yeah. Talk about what it's like running a business with your wife. I've interviewed some people before who have family businesses, and I've, taken a little bit from each of them, but I'd love to hear what your experience has been like.
So it's been absolutely perfect, and we've had 0 issues. Do you believe that?
No. You made it seem believable, but only because of what other people have told me. But am I wrong?
Yeah, no. So I would tell you it is interesting and unique, and it works for us. But I know there's a lot that struggle with that type of a relationship, and it has its challenges. I think the biggest challenge for us, Camber, is putting the work down. So in the evening after the kids go to bed, we're often talking about work, and we like that. For us, it's a labor of love, but we do have to be careful that doesn't get in the way of our marriage and family life and what's far more important to us than our business. So I think we're also very opposite. So you have to know your strengths and weaknesses, and it works for us because I'm highly emotional. My wife's very logical, and she's gifted in ways that I'm not. So for us, it's been a real blessing. But it's a lot of time together, a lot of conversation, and I'd say for us, it's been a really good thing. So again, won't bore you with details, but
yeah. No, I mean, these are all great. You're being very concise, which I think is helpful for those listening and watching. But I think I can imagine it would be really difficult to press pause, and like say, all right, let's stop working, especially in this day and age when everyone is really working remote. Which brings me to my next question, which is how have you been impacted by COVID-19? When you're typically used to going and speaking in live person sessions, what does that look like for you now?
Well, I would say this, the virtual world is booming. And so if you're a young professional, young entrepreneur, young business person, I'd be thinking about what are the next 5 and 10 years going to look like? Because the world as we know it today will forever look different. I compare, Camber, I like to think about the COVID-19 season is I think in many ways going to feel like the internet era, like the change that the internet was in a very different way, but similar in terms of impact and forced change. I think that the COVID season is going to force us to change the way that we do business and the way that we interact and communicate and recruit and develop and train. So for us, all of our coaching and speaking work has gone virtual. I'm not traveling. I was in a plane once a week. I don't have to do that anymore, which is great. I get to sit in sometimes sweatpants and a button-up shirt.
Yeah.
So, short sweats. And I get to work with a company, sometimes an audience of 1,000 people or 100 people. And that's a real gift and blessing. But yeah, I think about anticipatory leadership, just we got to be thinking about how's the world going to change around us. I do think in the next 5 years, we'll joke about Zoom calls.
Yep.
I don't think Zoom calls like we know them today will look very different. I believe there'll be a world of virtual reality, and I think digital will be the new thing. And so anyway, it's been good for us. We're very fortunate that we're in an industry that is still thriving and people need our help. And instead of, being in a conference room or an arena, speaking to a group of people, I'm sitting in my sweats.
Yeah.
Which works out.
Yep.
So
absolutely. I mean, the question that you mentioned at the beginning of your response there was, the question you would pose to young professionals, what will the next 5 to 10 years look like? Because I tell people all the time, I tell our audience all the time, the jobs that are going to be out there for you probably don't even exist now. Like it's just going to be so different. And so I would also imagine that not only is it good for you, this new kind of normal, because you now have more time to spend with your family, you're not traveling back and forth. But it's also probably a great way for you to just maximize the time that you have to offer because you're not traveling as much. So I would imagine that it's a big change. Staying on the topic of, your speaking and your coaching, this is a really broad question. So try to answer it the best you can. What is one of your favorite messages that you communicate to your audience? What's something, again, very broad, but I'm curious to know, I know you're talking to a lot of sales organizations, but what's a message that you really like to drive home?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Here's one, and there's many, but one would be, I think, especially for a lot of young professionals that are trying to find their identity, in many ways, we're always trying to find our way, but I think about my early 20s and even still today, I struggled with the opinion of other people. What are the people around me going to think about the decisions that I make in business? And, for most people, anything worthwhile in life is uphill. I mean, if you really want to do something significant, it's going to take some emotional risk. You got to put in extra effort. And a lot of times you'll deal with criticism because it won't make sense to others. So if you're going to work 60 hours a week instead of 40, it won't make sense. If you want to go into a business where, you're in sales and you're relying on commission, that won't make sense. If you decide to be an entrepreneur, there's going to be a huge group of people that won't make sense to. And so people tend to criticize the most what they understand the least. And usually if you're doing something significant, it's going to come with some ridicule and there's going to be a group of people that doesn't understand it. And I see too many people either quit or slow down at the expense of what other people think. And it's kind of tragic. because it's like that same adage of, the people that kind of rejected you in the beginning or gave you a hard time at the beginning are going to be the same people that when you make it to the top are going to be so proud to know you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, we talk a lot with young salespeople because that's our audience,
Yeah.
of dealing with the critics. And if you're going to live a life of impact, I think you'll have to accept a journey of criticism. For every 100 people that you lead, there'll be 10 people that criticize you. And so our job is to train our focus on the impact, and then the worry of the critic goes away. But we're going to have critics. We're going to have people that don't understand us, and that's okay. And I think if you're going to do significant work, actually that group of people grows larger. It doesn't get smaller, it gets bigger. You think about anybody that's leading an organization today, a musician, professional athlete, anybody that's in the spotlight has a huge group of people that rejects them, doesn't like them, doesn't accept them. And it's all good because they have a bigger group of people that do. So
right.
Anyway, that would be one message that I want a young professional to hear is be you, use your gifts, use your talents. We got one shot at this life, and your journey should be uphill if it's worthwhile.
Absolutely. I love that. You'd be a great person to, speak at our virtual happy hours. I think we can talk about that later, but that's really a wider audience of, young professionals. And I think that's so applicable what you just said to not just sales professionals, but young professionals in every field, like use your gift, because it doesn't matter if you're in a sales facing role, like people facing role, or, you're sitting behind a desk every day, you still want to use your gift. So I think that's very applicable to a lot of areas. Last two questions, and I'm mindful of our time, but I want to know, who is somebody that inspires you?
There's a lot of people that inspire me. I wish I could give you three, but I'll pick one.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad inspires me. He's been probably the greatest influence in my life, and really strong in his faith. And I admire the way that he values people and relationships. And probably more than anything, it's the order of loves in his life that really stand out to me. So faith, family, work is way after that. And I think he's been a person that, his values have always been really clear. And I think when your values are clear, decisions are easy. And for many young professionals, sometimes, and I was definitely guilty of this, Camber, is I set my goals before some of my values were concrete. And when you do that, if you've got really big goals and you chase them with everything that you have, but you haven't spent time on your values, sometimes your goals can take you to a place that you never intended to go. So that was a huge part of my story. Is I had a lot of early success, didn't know how to handle that success. And it wasn't that I didn't have values. I just hadn't spent enough time thinking through my values and living those out and putting those into practice. And man, if we don't do that work first as young professionals, I think we can really miss it as we try to achieve success or go to the next level, whatever that means for you. So I respect my dad for those reasons. He's been somebody that has, I think, led people with strong values and led himself a values-based place.
That's great. I think the order of loves, that's what you said. Orders of love, right? Is that what you said? I think that's great. Something that in your earlier young professional years, I think is not as clear. And, I'm guilty of that because I don't have a family that I live with, and right now it's kind of work. So I think that's something that as you develop as a professional, that becomes more clear. But it's important to keep in the back of your mind. All right. Last question. If you could describe your young professional years, because you technically still are a young professional, 21 to 39 years old. If you could describe your young professional years in one or two sentences, what would you say?
I would say massive amounts of discovery, a lot of challenge, and a lot of learning. And one thing, Canberra, and I'll leave our listeners with this. If there's anything that I did that I'm proud of, like if somebody said, hey, like, what are you most proud of in your professional journey? There's a lot of things in my personal life that I'm far more proud of, but in my professional journey, I asked a lot of questions. And, for a young professional, I'd say if you're not annoying at least one person, tactfully and professionally, right? Like,
Yeah.
Don't text them 9 times a day.
Right.
Tactfully and professionally, if you're not annoying at least one person, you're probably really not driving growth in your professional life.
Mm-hmm.
We always tell people in your firm or your organization, you should break the record for questions asked in a first year.
That's cool.
Pitbull, Mr. Worldwide said, if you ask for money, you'll get advice. If you ask for advice, you'll get money twice. Mm-hmm. And it's the only time I ever quote Pitbull, by the way.
Yeah, I was like, wow, do you frequent that? That's funny.
I was curious. I was really curious. And
Mm-hmm.
I still am today. I'm just constantly trying to gain more insight and wisdom and knowledge. And the only way to do that is by seeking counsel, asking questions, and being around the right people. So, yeah, that's how I would summarize my early journey. And lastly, a lot of failure. Just a lot of failure, a lot of dead ends. But John Maxwell says you either win or you learn. And in my case, I was fortunate. I learned a lot. So
yeah. Well, that's great. I think that's a great way to end the interview. So thank you so much, Jordan, for being on YoPro in the Know today. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Cameron. And thanks for the work that you're doing. I know this time together reaches a lot of people, and you've interviewed, I think you said, hundreds of people. And so the work you're doing is significant, and young professionals I need this type of content in my life, the type of work that you do. So thanks for what you do, and keep on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for those of you listening and watching, we will be sure to share Jordan's information, link to his website and his LinkedIn. And I think you have a podcast now. Is that what I saw?
Yeah.
I did my research.
Yeah, it's great. You did. Montgomery Company's podcast. So we're fortunate, like you, that we get to spend time with some cool and creative people, and it's been really fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jordan.
Thank you, Camber.